Welcome to the Cabincast, your Getaway Primer.
The Cabincast is brought to you by Roughing It in Style. Roughing It in Style's family business was created to supply folks like you with unique furnishings that fit homes where memories are made. And like these memories, their handmade furniture and decor is made to last. They emphasize creative innovation in interior design, cabinet design, and custom furniture. Their designers are available to help you create spaces that are warm, inviting, and fit your unique style. There are 2 locations, one in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, in Harshaw, 10 miles south of Mincoqua, and one out west in Fort Collins, Colorado. Find out more today at roughingItinstyle.com.
Hey, Erik.
Hey, Kristin.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Another night in the recording studio.
Yeah.
And getting to introduce a great interview again to our listeners.
Yeah, this week we have Kelly Cooper from Laketime Management. Laketime Management is a concierge service that works in the Northwoods up here, helping out cabin and lake homeowners.
And I thought that Kelly would make a great person to interview because when I met her, I was just in awe of some of the stories and history she knew about the area. And even though our listeners come from all over the country and all over the world, I think so many small towns like Mincoqua have similar stories, where Mincoqua started out as a lumber town and then grew into this resort town because of all the lakes and forests around it. So I just thought it was interesting to hear how it started out with these lumberjacks. Actually, they're still lumberjacks. It's not like they went away. They're still lumberjacks in the Northwoods.
Yeah, a little more high tech.
Yeah, so lumberjacking has changed, but I think that needs to be on our list for interview.
Interview a lumberjack?
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting and kind of see the history and what they do these days and how they help manage the forest. Anyway, I thought she had great stories to hear about kind of the history of that. And while we were talking, it gave me a memory of a reading I had from a book about lumberjacks. So I thought I'd share that with everybody too.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah. Lumberjack was a picturesque fellow. Red predominated as a color in the wools that kept his strong brawn body from the biting cold of midwinter's below-zero weather. Many a jack, after his land-lubbering days in the forest, turned river hog with the freshets of spring, and entered upon the dangerous employment of floating logs to sawmills. The rivermen usually wore underwear and socks of heavy wool, and generally they were a fiery red. His outside shirt was either a vivid blue or a pronounced red. Wool kept the cold from his body and was quick to dry, for the river hog knew many immersions. Oftentimes, and this was especially true of the French Canadian, he wore a colorful sash about his waist. With a jackknife, he severed his heavy woolen trousers just below the knee, making them staggered and thus more convenient for the operations on the rivers that required agility and freedom of the legs. Lumberjacks periodically swelled the population of the Mincoqua settlement and quite relieved it of backwoods boredom. The French Canadian, the Scandinavian, the Scotchman, the Irishman, the New Englander came and mingled. The Irishman generally began the famous fisticuffs so characteristic of a day that exulted in feats of physical prowess. One old lumberman, in a book of his reminiscences, declares, "Fighting to Irishmen is not only a moral duty and a physical necessity, but a positive pleasure." They had that positive pleasure very often. A few hot drinks seemed to empower biceps and fists to distribute delightful black eyes to the general public. In fact, it was considered a disgrace to be in town longer than a week without gaining orbital discolorations. The jacks never used firearms to settle their disputes. Fists were made for that purpose, and sometimes beer bottles had a use other than as containers for the malt brew. Anything could start a fight. One man, claiming that he was more of a masculine individual than another, or that he could do more work, could enkindle a fiery contest that would eventuate in a free-for-all conflagration that nothing outside the state militia could have quenched. But strangely enough, there were no fatalities. Probably the absence of firearms accounts for this, or the fact that there was not a general spirit of hatred among the fighters. They fought because they liked to, and had nothing else to occupy their spare hours. It was their amusement. They did not fight scientifically. All the tactics taboo in modern boxing or wrestling were employed. Gouging, kicking, biting, hitting below the belt, strangleholds, finger breaking, anything to put a man out. This was particularly true in camp fights, which were generally waged between sober men, since liquor had no legitimate part in camp life. Occasionally a bottle would be bootlegged in, but if the offender were apprehended, he was given the wages due to him, and with his turkey slung over his shoulder, was told to hit the trail. No rounds were counted in any fight, and it did not end until one of the contestants cried, "Enough!" He might be covered with blood, but he was generally unhurt, unless, as sometimes happened, it was a fight of hatred, and in that event, he was a hospital case at its conclusion. But the lumberjack of that early day was a respectable individual. His period of dissipation was short. It lasted only so long as his winter wages, and after those were flung away in his wild orgies, he returned to the woods and behaved himself for a considerable time. That many of the old-time lumberjacks are living today and gaining a mellow age is self-evident proof that they did not fling away their physical substance in perpetual dissipations. Many did not even drink at all. Some drank themselves into their graves. They had their code, and it was a chivalrous one. Rough in dress and speech and manners, gaining their livelihood by the hardest kind of manual labor, living, loving, and laughing crudely, still they were gentlemen. Writes John Emmerich Nelligan, an old lumberman. No one could offend, insult, or molest a woman on the street. No man could even speak lightly of a woman of good reputation without suffering swift and violent justice at the hands of his fellows. The lumberjacks were children of their time. In an untamed wildness, they pitted their strength against the forces of nature that must be conquered. Their very lives depended upon keenness of mind and quickness of body. Either nature would win in the struggle for mastery or they. The disappearance of the virgin trees advertised their victory, and the lords of the lumberdom for whom they labored grew rich and able to hand down substantial patrimonies.
That's great.
Do you think the lumberjack still dressed that way?
I don't know. I think that wool is more and more popular all the time. I was actually just talking to my dad today about merino wool, and he's like, I don't like wool. It's really itchy. And I remember really itchy wool sweaters and things you'd have to wear to church when you're a kid.
Yeah.
But they have merino wool now, which is such a soft, nice, like smart wool socks, I think, are merino wool. It's just like amazing. And last year, I got my boots soaking wet when I was walking out to a tree stand to hunt, and my feet stayed just as warm as they would be. You know, you think your feet get wet, your hunt's over. But because I was wearing thick wool socks, it stayed pretty darn warm.
So were they red or blue?
The socks were not. I think they were probably some form of camouflage, just because the deer, they see your feet first. Is really
right. Yeah.
But there are a couple other fun things from that reading. All the fighting is hilarious. It's like they'd spend all day cutting down trees, and then at the end of the day, they just beat the crap out of each other.
Like how they still had energy to do anything.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a story up here. I don't know if I've told this on the Cabincast before, but in Price County, where we build our barnwood furniture, the county seat, and this is my understanding, was decided by a fist fight.
Oh.
So Park Falls and Phillips were arguing over who got to be this seat where the courthouse would go in the county, and they decided to have a fight. So they picked the toughest guy in each town, and they had a boxing match. And even though I'm not sure at the time, but Park Falls is a little bit bigger than Phillips, the guy from Phillips won the boxing match.
Wow.
So they ended up with the county seat, and I believe they still don't like each other to this day.
You haven't told that story because I would remember that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So they could, that should be how all political choices are made. Just fight it out physically.
Well, if anybody else has stories like that, they can send it to our email or send it on our socials, how your county seat was won.
Yeah, that would be a great stories to collect. And then the last thing that stuck out to me is the word orbital discoloration.
Right.
So that sounds so much classier than, you got a black eye from a fist fight. It's like, he had a orbital discoloration. So
if you come in with one, we'll have to ask you what it was about.
It's a lot classier, though.
It is,
isn't a black eye. It's an orbital discoloration.
Yep. I know. It was interesting to hear how they talked about how it was just for fun. It wasn't hatred. They just
Yeah, actually, and then fighting is pretty fun. But we used to box in high school and after high school at parties and had a good time.
I just can't get it. Autumn's looking at me like, what? Yeah.
It's a good way.
Uh-huh.
To
I had brothers, so I did see that happen.
Yeah.
And one time, the first time I was at, maybe one of the first times I was at my husband's house, we were sitting in the living room all around, and he and his brother just start wrestling. I thought the house was going to fall down, and everyone kept talking like it wasn't even happening.
Just a normal
and I'm thinking,
thing.
What in the world? And I guess it is normal.
Yeah, my dad tells a story when he was in, I believe, middle school or high school. I can't remember which. 2 guys got into a fist fight at the lunchroom. So the teachers ran over, broke up the fight, hauled them to the gym, put heavy boxing gloves on them.
Oh my gosh.
And made them fight in the gymnasium until they both basically fell over from exhaustion to teach them a lesson. Like
Right.
this is so instead of being like, break it up, we're calling the school policeman's coming
Right.
over. You're both getting sent to wherever the police, you're getting arrested and getting
Right.
charges against you. No, put on the boxing gloves. We're going to settle this by just sheer big
Right.
padded huge gloves. Nobody's going to get hurt. And they
I can just picture a cartoon almost with the big gloves
just
on.
wail on each other.
Oh my goodness.
So, interesting.
Yeah. How times have changed.
Times have changed.
Well, another thing that Kelly talks about is interesting. There are really interesting characters that have come to Mincoqua and the Northwoods, and I'm sure that that is true in so many towns. But there was a president and a movie star that would come hang out here, and she shares some fun stories about that too. And one of the presidents, he came because it was a self-prescribed getaway. Have you ever given yourself a self-prescribed getaway? Like, write it out. I have to do it.
Yeah, just
Sam, I have to go.
steal one of those little RX sheets from the doctor's office and say, Erik needs a vacation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Where would you go?
Where would I go right now? I mean, it's hunting season, so I'd probably go to some sort of place where the hunting's really good, like Kansas or Nebraska.
Yeah. Do you like to just sit in the stand, even if you're not going to get anything, just to be in the woods, or?
Yeah, you know what? I really enjoy just sitting out in peaceful nature. It's kind of amazing just to be out there and see nature as you hope exists without human intervention. If you're walking and animals see you and they're running away, but if you can just exist in nature dressed like a tree,
Yeah,
just
right?
so that nothing knows you're there, that's really fun just to see things happen without noticing you. And then I really just judge a good hunt by would I have had the opportunity to put food on the table.
Right.
Is kind of fun too. So that's kind of how I look at it. But it's relaxing. I listen to a lot of different podcasts and things where people recommend meditation as a way to just kind of center yourself and collect your thoughts. And I think that spending a few hours in a tree stand with you can really focus your thoughts in a way. So that's kind of my meditation too.
Yeah, that's very peaceful. We're excited to share this episode with Kelly Cooper as she shares what it's like to grow up with raising children while running a resort, which makes me think of another thing she talked about.
Oh, what is that?
Well, you might not even remember this part, but she talked about how her kids would make friends in the summer when people would come and stay at their resort, and you called them single-serving friends.
Yeah, single-serving friends.
Uh-huh. So did you ever have single-serving friends growing up?
Yeah, I remember some distinct situations where, and I've talked about this in the past, we used to go up to the Michigamme Reservoir in the UP, and you'd always find one or two kids that, I mean, whether they were only children or didn't have any siblings their own age, they'd kind of latch on to our family because I grew up, my sister's 2 years, my brother's 4 years younger than me, but we kind of ran as a pack. And a lot of times we would bring up our own friends with us. So we would find these people, these kids that would hang out with us for a week straight. You'd know their names. Maybe you'd have dinner and a cookout with them. Your parents might become friends and hang out together, fish together for these times. And I don't remember any of their names specifically, but I remember like playing kick the can with a huge swarm of kids that you never knew before. Everyone would load up into their vehicles, and occasionally, maybe the next year, they'd be back that same week, but you just kind of have to meet them all over again or not. And, you know, things change as a kid. You change so much in a year. But yeah, I remember that distinctly. Just meeting kids, having a blast, being like, oh, this is like a really awesome person. They'd be a great friend, and then never seeing them again.
Well, and I don't know if you're like me. We would go every Labor Day weekend. Growing up in Texas, we would go over to East Texas, to Tyler, Texas, to a camp called Pine Cove. And it was family camp weekend at Labor Day. And so every Labor Day, we would have these same friends that we would get to hang out with. But it was just the weekend. And in my mind as a kid, it was the whole summer almost. So in those few days, you just lived a lifetime with these people, playing games and swimming and fishing. And was it the same for you when you think back on time as a kid?
Oh, yeah.
It just seems like never ending.
Yeah, time as a kid seemed to just stretch on in a really wonderful way.
Oh, yeah.
Like a week at the lake up north felt like a month.
Yes.
Now, with little kids and the business and staying busy, every day feels like it lasts 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just goes so fast. And I definitely miss the times when life felt like it was moving slow.
Another reason to take getaways.
Yeah.
To make life slow down and
get that back a little bit.
I have a favorite quote I always think about, and I say, be where your feet are. Like, leave your brain at work and just be in the getaway moments with your kids and your family, and just be right where your feet are.
Yeah, it never helps to think about, in a week from now when I'm back at work, I need to take care of this, and
right.
this. You just, things like that will take care of themselves when that time comes. And if you're not being present and in the moment, you're really doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah. So take a lesson from our own childhoods and make those getaways last longer. And we can still have the chance to make single serving friends on our own getaways as grown-ups. So anyway, this was another great conversation and interview with Kelly Cooper.
Enjoy.
So I am really excited to introduce our listeners to Kelly Cooper today. Kelly is president of Laketime Management in Mincoqua, Wisconsin. She started Laketime Management in 2010 as a full-service concierge coordinating and managing cabin and cottage caretaking, housekeeping, grocery and errand running, personal chefs, and vacation home hospitality services. She also provides special occasion party planning and assistance for everything from dinner parties to picnics and baby showers. So she's a great person to know. She's a little jack of all trades, Jill of all trades. I first met Kelly when I decorated a cabin last year for a holiday home tour up in Manitowish Waters. And she had been following my blog and introduced herself when she came through the tour. And that was so fun to meet you that way, Kelly.
That was great.
I found out she is quite the lover of history and about the incredible past of the Mincoqua area. So we got together soon after, and she shared her albums of vintage postcards with me and stories that left me in awe. I knew she would be the perfect guest on the Cabincast because you guys are going to love these stories too. So Kelly, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kristin and Erik.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. Kelly and I went driving around Mincoqua, and she just was so much fun to listen to. I loved hearing about what you do and what you've learned in your time up
Thank
north.
you.
Were you born in Mincoqua? Where are you from?
I was not. I was born in Kentucky, and my parents lived in Southern Illinois at the time, and in a town called Vienna. My dad was a Southern Baptist pastor of the First Baptist Church of Vienna, and lived there until I was 10 as the PK in the town, one of the PKs in the town. And then we went up north to Des Plaines, Illinois. So a big transition in my childhood from small town life to suburban life, but city life. And it was a big, big change. Of course, you get accustomed to the changes over time. And we lived in the Northwest suburbs, and that's where I grew up and spent the rest of my childhood and early adult life. At some point, I had kids, got married and had kids, and we decided we wanted to move up north. So at that time, we were way out in the western suburbs in Oswego, Illinois, and we decided to take the plunge and move up north, and we were looking at resorts and different various hospitality businesses to purchase. And we ended up at the Bayview Inn in Mincoqua. And we had our children, and that's where we raised them. And it was such a neat thing to be able to do that and experience a business, a hospitality business right in, just north of downtown on Lake Mincoqua, and raise the kids in that lifestyle. And it was a lot of fun. And that's how I ended up here.
What did you love about raising your kids on the lake?
A lot of things. I was asking them tonight, I'm like, what were your favorite memories, guys? And I just, all the things I can recall now, years past, I can remember summers, as soon as school let out, when the kids were in school, it was hard to get them up to get on the bus. As soon as school let out, they were up at like the crack of dawn and they, in their pajamas, they would grab their fishing poles. Their eyes were still closed and they had bare feet. They would grab their fishing poles and go out to the dock to fish at, I don't know what time that was, and that's how they started every day in the summer, every single day. And they did not slow down all day long. And at the end of the day, my favorite memory looking back at my kids growing up that way, was in the evening, the sun would set on Lake Mincoqua. And as it was going down, it was just, we have the most beautiful sunsets here. It's just amazing. And the kids would be swimming on the raft all day long. But always at sunset time, they would end up under the raft. And I could see their little heads under the raft. And as the sun was setting and you could hear them talking, that was their clubhouse. And I'm sure they told a lot of secrets and stories and, just did a lot of growing up actually under our swim raft.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's probably
what a
my
visual.
ultimate favorite memory of them.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, that like their own little clubhouse.
It was their clubhouse. They loved it. They loved it. And it was funny raising your kids in a resort style setting. We saw people from all over the world, and we just had a lot of Europeans come through here in the summertime, and we met some amazing guests over the years. We were there about 10 years, and it was just such a fascinating lifestyle. But I remember the kids were so little when we first started, and the two younger ones, they were probably about 5 and 6, and they were the porters of the hotel. And they would wait for check-ins, and then they would, as soon as they would check in, they'd be standing at the door asking if they can take their bags up to their room, and they always did,
So truly a family business.
It was such a family business. And their favorite memories were, we always had campfires by the lake, stories by the lake. They really enjoyed being raised on the lake.
So I always wondered, when I would go up and visit the resort that we would go up to as kids, we'd always make like these little single serving friends where you'd meet people and other families and you'd make friends. So with your kids living there and having new children showing up all the time, did they gravitate or did they kind of stay away because they knew they were going to show up, or was it like repeat families that would come back every year? My
kids absolutely loved it. And every year they would see the same kids. We watched families with the young kids grow up. You'd only see them once a year. But it was so neat. And as soon as they would arrive for check-in, my kids were ready to play, ready to have fun and see them again. And they would hang out. And it was just part of their childhood. And it was part of our guest children's childhood as well.
Right.
Just hanging out all together. And there were times when the whole hotel was filled with families that had kids, and it was neat.
Oh, that's fun.
I've never heard that phrase, though, Erik, before, the single serving friends.
That's kind of like on an airplane when you meet somebody and
Hi, nice to meet
just
you.
never see them again.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Yeah. So I could see kids going two different ways. One where they just say, well, I'm never going to see you again, so I won't put in the time. Or I'm going to take advantage of meeting all these new people coming in.
Mine were extremely outgoing, friendly kids.
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's
talk
great.
about life skills and meeting people and feeling confident.
Right.
That's good stuff.
So a lot of interesting stories happened in the past around Lake Mincoqua. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting area with a really neat history. And, we were talking before the show with Kelly about, I think a lot of the story of Mincoqua is probably similar to a lot of places in the country, kind of how the small town started and then if it became a tourist town. How did Mincoqua start?
things changed pretty quick when logging came. And when they started to log, they didn't do it like they do today, where there's a managed system and they replant right away, or that there's a system for ongoing, forestry. Back then, they came through and they clear-cutted everything here. And there's pictures that we have. We were looking at postcards, and there's pictures that are so sad. And you kind of put yourself in the place of, thinking about what it was really like to live back then. The forests were gone. They took them down all the way from everywhere. I mean, there's pictures we see from Boulder Junction area and around Trout Lake and Mincoqua area, just clear cut. So
what time period was that?
Late 1800s.
Okay.
So the logging industry was huge, and that was really what started to develop here, was the logging industry. And then they went and they brought the train in, and that changed everything. That just brought more accessibility for the loggers, but also for tourism. And we even had like a train that was a weekend train that would come up just for the weekend.
I wish we still had that one.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Wouldn't that be amazing? I think that we could decorate it really, really neat.
Yeah.
And of course, if you ever take a hike, I think some of the signs are gone now. At some point, hopefully they'll fix them. But there used to be an interpretive trail on the Bearskin Trail. And it talked about, it wasn't easy bringing the train here. I mean, we had marshland going up to the Bearskin Trail where we see the trestles. They had a heck of a time and some tragedies and that putting that train system in. But it changed everything. And it was in the early 1900s, it brought something different. And that's when the resort started. And you would see family resorts and American style plans, starting to pop up. And you saw just different places to come up to fish, to be with families, to enjoy time on the lakes. And that's where a lot of that early development started. The town still, I think Mincoqua was developing, and they still had a little bit of that rough history going on in the early 20th century.
Yeah, with a logging camp kind of theme.
Yes, yeah. So, but you can start to see it develop. And one of the things that I guess I'm really grateful for, and I, doing a little history study, but was when the CCC camps came up. During the Depression, they had hired all these young men, and they had a program to rebuild the forest and to make camping grounds and to
in CCC stands, is that like a
the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Okay.
And there's so much evidence of that here now, and it's neat to be able to go see it. One of the places, it's one of my favorite places nearby, and there's so many things that are so nearby. When we had the hotel, it was nice to be able to say, you're in Mincoqua, but a half hour here or an hour here, or we're so centralized to some really neat things. But one of them would be like Copper Falls. And if you take the interpretive trail there, you'll learn a lot about the CCC and what they did there in developing a trail system and a camping system for that area, but also reforesting. They did so much with reforesting. If you go out to Star Lake, one of the neatest things on a trail walk through Star Lake would be where the forests are planted, and every year they measure the circumference of those trees still today. And it's neat to see, and it's easy on the trail.
So these are young guys that during the Depression, I think you have this visual of everyone just like sitting around. So
standing in line waiting for work.
So they would come up and just do project
They
work?
would take the young men and they would bring them to different areas throughout the country. And so this was a national program. And they would give them $30 a day, is for what I understand. A lot of those guys took the $5 and then they sent $25 back home to their family. So it was was such a needed program at that time. It was something that gave them dignity, gave them work, gave them, opportunity. And they built some amazing things in that short time. It was 1933 to 1942.
Fantastic.
Of course, 1942, we went into World War II. But in that brief period of time, they performed a miracle. I mean, just bringing back the woods, bringing back the life, taking these natural resources that we have, the waterfalls and the forest systems, and just building trails, and it's just amazing. It's one of the things I appreciate here a lot.
Yeah, that is amazing. Something to learn more about for sure. And I think up in Manitowish Waters, the Discovery Center, I think that was one of the CCC camps.
Yes.
I think they still have the names on the cabins, and
I believe so.
It's neat to see. I know there's one over in Eagle River too.
Yeah, it would be really neat to see a map of all of the buildings, because it's even neat just to see the buildings.
Right.
Just incredible.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic history of Mincoqua that develops. An area like this is a nice draw for some different characters that come to town. So, do you have some stories?
I have to preface this by saying I'm not a local historian, and a lot of the stories I learned, we were doing a boat tour. And actually, I taught the history to my kids so that they could do the boat tour while I cleaned hotel rooms, which was really great.
Oh, you guys offered your own boat tour?
We did. We had the Lake Mincoqua, the electric boat tour. And I really love history, so I wanted to just kind of share some of the stories with them, And I went around and I interviewed quite a few people, and some of the stories, you got several different versions, so we just had to pick the most likely version of the story. And a lot of it, you could let's just say they may be legend, but we don't know. But there's a lot of great resources. If you want to learn about history, we have a Mincoqua museum that's amazing, and the docents there are just the sweetest people, and they will answer any question. One of the things I think I was telling you about, they keep a file system on residents here that make it into the newspaper, and they just so diligently for so many years, they will clip out clippings of, articles about people, the families or whatever, and whenever they've made the news, and they preserve it, and they keep it in a file system, which is neat.
It is a really neat hotel. It's a really neat museum.
Yeah.
My kids love going to it.
It is wonderful. And we have the Dr. Kate Museum as well, which is wonderful. We have other museums throughout the area, so we're a great area for learning history.
Yeah.
We have amazing antique stores.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fantastic to be able to learn and talk to people that have all these great stories.
What are some of your favorites?
One of my favorites, and honestly, a slight obsession. There's a story of a guy, Casey Lambert, that I just love the story. His name was Stafford Lightburn Lambert, and he was the heir to Listerine. And grew up in St. Louis, and his family had property on Lake Mincoqua, and he ended up establishing kind of as an estate and had multiple buildings on this property. And it was across the street or across the lake from us. So we looked at, there's one that's kind of prominent, and that would be the boathouse called the Hangar, where he had his float plane that he would. Interesting, fascinating person. And some referred to him as the great Gatsby of the Northwoods. And I would say, kind of like reading all about him, I would say that's probably as close as you can get. I mean, my goodness, that guy. He's an inventor, a creator. He traveled the world. He had lots of hobbies. Flying was his number one hobby. When he was a young man, he was a stunt pilot in the circuit. And he's in the Caterpillar Club. Just fascinating history. But I love the stories of his lifestyle on Lake Mincoqua. And one of the most famous, anybody would tell you that could remember, is that he would set off his cannon at sunset every night. And that just,
And what time period was that?
I would believe that would be like the 40s, 50s,
Wow.
60s.
Wow.
And was that cannon pointed at like a neighbor? He didn't like. He was actually shooting at someone on the boat going by, or
I did hear a story that he had a rival, let's just say, on Quaggasaga on the other side, who maybe didn't like the noise that he created. I don't know what the deal was, but he would throw a cannonball in there when he wanted to send him a message, and he was taunting him from the shoreline. I know that they did a lot of skeet shooting from his boathouse back then. So the legend is that you can't swim anywhere on that property right now because there still is some glass over there.
oh wow,
And cannonballs.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe. But he just had the history of Casey Lambert is something to look into if you ever get a chance. It's just amazing. He was friends with Eisenhower as well, with Howard Young. There was a story that he dated Elizabeth Taylor once and found her to be boring.
Because Elizabeth Taylor, I've heard she learned to water ski here in Mincoqua.
I would believe that.
Because her uncle lived here.
Howard Young.
Mm-hmm.
And she visited many, many times.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I haven't been able to discover a whole lot of stories about Elizabeth Taylor. Here a little bit here and there. They loved it. Yeah, right.
No, that
but
sounds
of course,
something
she helped. She was
Right.
she was here for the opening of the Howard Young Medical Center, the hospital.
Yeah, the hospital in town. There's still
and that
pictures
was
on the wall.
all the news back then. I mean, just front headlines. Having her here. But we had over the years we've had many celebrities, and one of the nice things about this area is it's a nice quiet place to kind of just come and retreat from some of it. So a lot of the stories that you wish you knew because you know that they're here. It's a nice quiet place to just be yourself and not be part of that scene.
So how often did Eisenhower come? I know he came and watched the Mincoqua Bat ski show, and I've seen a lot of pictures of him. Did he come to visit Lambert or?
Yes. Eisenhower came to visit Howard Young. He was a friend of Howard Young, and would come to visit him. And he came, I believe, while in office or just shortly after. But I think it was while he was in office. He had a heart attack or heart surgery, and he was recovering. Lake Mincoqua, this area was his prescription for healing, which was to me telling.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And they told him to come up here. Relax, get away, and get away from it all for a while, and recoup. And he would, if you were here back then, bright and early in the morning, and you drove down there by the country club, you might see the president swimming in his early morning swim, which I always think would be fascinating to have been there back then.
Definitely.
And was that
But
prescription
that was
written in his handwriting?
prescription.
Just
Yeah,
like self-prescribed. I have to go to Mincoqua and
I
spend
have to go
time
swim
at the
for a
country
while.
club.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That's a pretty good idea to put out there,
I think
right?
so too. Yeah, I think self-prescribed getaways. Could be a thing.
I think so too. Yeah. There's a story you told me too about some hidden jewels on an island somewhere. Where did that story start?
This is legend, and I have been able to find some stories that corroborate that in some books at the library. But BJ Sport Shop used to be a brothel, and back when that was the red light district, I suppose. And the madam at the brothel was Trixie, and from what my understanding was, Trixie loved to receive jewelry for her pay, and she had quite a collection. And at some point, Trixie passed away, and the women of the town kind of said, "No, we don't want her buried in the public cemetery." So they had to find a place to bury her outside of that. And a gentleman named Capray, who was kind of what seems to be like a local historian, he wrote down a lot of the history. He had a launch boat, and they put her in a pine box, and they put her in the launch boat, and they took her off to bury her on an island. And I think it was chronicled at one point that she was buried between two pine trees overlooking her girls on a particular island. And so the island that they were saying that for years people dug it up. They went there and they started to dig up this island. And I read that later on Capray said, okay, so, in one of the journals, to us old timers, that particular island is not what you think it is. And to us old timers, that island is a different island. And sure enough, the island that he was saying, I don't want to say what it is because it's a private property.
Yeah, we don't want people going to dig it up.
But no, I don't want anybody digging it up. But the description was between two trees overlooking the girl, and so that does make a whole lot more sense up on a hilltop.
So they buried her with
they
the
buried
jewels.
her with all the jewels.
Oh.
So for the longest time, that was her. That was the secret treasure of Mincoqua.
Well, it was find Trixie.
Yeah,
that'll be
find Trixie. So going back to raising my kids up here in the Northwoods, that was I think that was their life goal, was to find Trixie's jewels. And they had one year got metal detectors for Christmas. And first they started, and we were on that back road behind where we were, the Bayview Inn. Mm-hmm. That back road used to be Old Highway 51, not where it is today, but it went back right along the lake back then. And so when they started, they would go right out there right in the sand on our frontage, and they started digging up. How many times did they swim out there? But they started digging up all kinds of things, car parts, like whole car parts and whole cars.
Oh my
it was just like
gosh.
crazy. And they would find license plates and hubcaps from like Model A, Model Ts, and just all of these things. And then that kind of led into more. And then one of our neighbors, he started digging up his property because he knew that there was a dump on that site from 100 years back. And so they literally dug a hole with our neighbor. I don't know, 7-8 feet deep.
Wow.
They spent the whole summer digging this hole, looking for treasure. And
what a way to spend a summer. That sounds like it should be a movie.
By doing all of that, we determined that Trixie's jewels were not there.
Yeah.
And that's where they were looking for. But they were, we've determined that they're long gone into the lake. Yeah. If they ever existed in the beginning to begin with.
There's been some erosion probably. And
yeah.
So we can scuba dive and find Trixie's jewels. Yeah. Lambert's cannonballs, and clay pigeons, and there's all kinds of stuff down there.
It would be a lot of fun to do that.
Right. Wow. So you help take care of properties for clients.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you get to see a lot of different types of cabins. What are some of the most interesting things you've seen inside cabins that you think, if I was going to build my own cabin, I'd want to make sure to include that?
Well, of course, because taking care of homes, you have a wish list.
Right.
I've got a wish list. Big, beautiful windows.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be my number one thing, because you're just living here with the trees and the beauty, and it's just I love the homes that have the big, beautiful windows, especially windows over a sink. And I happen to right now I don't have a window over my kitchen sink, and it's on the top of my list.
So our listeners are going to probably want to take a notepad and a pen out right now. Window over sink.
We see so many different kinds of homes, and up here you have the historic homes. The historic resorts that are now private. And then we have a lot of new construction and everything in between. I think what I see centrally is places to rest. And I like that. Nooks and reading nooks. And boy, I just love the way people dress their fireplace areas. It just looks so inviting and so sweet. And we see a lot of beautiful porches here, just for entertaining and that is one of the things we're seeing more of is people trying to entertain, doing a lot more entertaining than I think they did 10, 20 years ago. They're in their home, and they're wanting to do dinner parties again. They're wanting to do get-togethers and have cocktails before they go out to the supper club and things like that. We're seeing a movement towards gathering together more in the home and entertaining more in the home, which is nice.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're seeing intentionally building for that, which is great to see.
Yeah.
I like that.
And you forgot wide doors that are easy to carry furniture through.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Those are
Says
really
the
important.
furniture mover.
If I ever have one request for a contractor builder is when you install chandeliers that are 18, 20 feet or taller, get a winch system.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Put a winch system
For
in
cleaning.
so they can be dropped down and they can be cleaned more than once a year, once a decade.
Yeah, that's a great
That would
idea.
be one of my favorite tips.
We had a chandelier once at our cabin that just fell down.
Oh, no.
We had one of those old wagon
Were
wheel.
you home when
I
it
was
happened?
home. I was at my parents' little cabin on Nokomis. It was not too long after we got it. I was staying there by myself, and I was sitting in a chair and a half just watching TV, and the table is only a couple feet behind me. There's a little 12-inch bench and then a table, and all of a sudden, wham! The chain broke on the chandelier, and it was a real old wagon wheel, and all the lights shattered. It exploded, hit the table.
You must have thought somebody was shooting at you.
Oh, I thought an airplane hit the house.
It was Casey
So I
Lambert
just-
come back.
Yeah, Casey Lambert's ghost. So I just, jumped 10 feet in the air forward, just ducked out of the way and turned around, and the chandelier was destroyed, but the table held up pretty well.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you get the nice rustic heavy tables. But wide doors, those old cabins that you go to have 26-inch doors, 27-inch doors. So we like wider doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a nice thing.
Yeah, and I love what you said about seeing places for people to, cozy places by the fire and places to sit and read. Because I think that is a lot of what people love on their getaways. They love to find a place to get away from the noise, a place to take time for a hobby they don't have time for during their regular work week.
Yeah.
If it's to read or do a puzzle or take a nap.
Yeah, this is a great destination area for resort homes and lake homes, cabins, cottages. But the one thing that you can describe here just about anywhere universally around here is the serenity. And not so much for me. I still live in town, so it's a little noisy. That is going to be one of my things that one day I want to be out where it's quiet, really quiet. But yeah, it's amazing how beautifully serene it is here. And of all times a year.
So what's one of your favorite things on the lake besides seeing your kids grow up? What would your best lake day look like for you?
Well, nothing beats a pontoon ride.
Yeah.
To me, because you're just relaxed and just enjoying being out there on the lake and nowhere really to go except just around and have fun. And I love waving at people and having a lunch and being able to stop at lunch. It's a great time. I enjoy what I do with the clients in that one of the reasons why I started what I do is I spoke to a lot of folks that just didn't seem to have time to enjoy their lake homes as much as they wanted to. And what gets in the way is the to-do list. And the to-do list just kind of halts everything, and they always can add to it, and it just never seems to go away. So we try to take the to-do list and take care of that for them so that they can get out and experience the lake and days on pontoons and out there water skiing with the kids, and that's one of the joys that we have in what we do.
I think what you said about waving too, I noticed that, Erik, you probably do too out on the lake, that every person waves at each other.
That's the best part.
I mean, I don't think you can be grumpy on a boat. It's just like everybody is friendly and everybody waves. I think my kids, when they were littler, they were like, "Do you know those people?" Nope. You just say hi.
I love those old Wisconsin commercials where everybody's just waving at each other. Wait.
Yeah. It's just a friendly place to be.
That's fantastic. So thank you so much
Sure.
for joining us
Thank you.
and sharing
Thank
some
you.
of the stories. And
That was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Kelly.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Cabincast. You can find details and more information in the show notes on our website at www.thecabincast.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen so you won't miss a single episode. Follow us on your favorite social media channels. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Cabincast. We'd also love to hear from you. We want to hear your getaway and cabin stories. For a chance to have your story featured on an upcoming episode, email us at getaway@thecabincast.com. Until next week, enjoy the journey.